Hi everyone, yep, I'm back again. Sorry that I'm just going to see if I can get some better lighting. Sit under here, see if this works. There we go. Right. The reason for this video is it's just something I realise I've not done before. Is although I've given my thoughts on new movies occasionally that I've seen, I've not done a sat down simple review of a classic movie which I like. So I'm going to do one now. What I'm talking about is the 1999 animated Warner Brothers classic, The Iron Giant. Now I purchased this Blu-ray just yesterday, and I watched it, and I'm just going to open up the Blu-ray case and show you. Yes, it came with an ultraviolet digital copy, which I have already done. Yes, I've already downloaded that, so I can watch that on the go. Right, before I get into my thoughts on the movie, say this is actually the Signal edition, Signature edition. Sorry, Signature edition, that was re-released in 2015, of which contains 2 new scenes in the movie. The one that's highly noticeable is this sequence where the Iron Giant has a dream while he's sleeping in the junkyard, remembering that he was lost from an actual army of Iron Giants from outer space. And that brings us to kind of where the movie, right? So the movie is based on the novel. I think the original it was set in the 1950s. The novel The Iron Man by Ted Hughes, and yeah, the movie and the book are very, very different. So after I watched the film, I did watch some of the making of the Iron Giant documentary on here. And I do remember the Iron Man book because when I was a kid, my mum actually read it to me, but I also listened to a few chapters of an audiobook version last night to familiarise myself. Yeah, so the Iron Man is basically, it's set in England. The story is set in England as opposed to different from the film, where the film is set in a small town in America. But the Iron Man begins with the Iron Giant coming out the ocean. Yeah, it says he arose from the ocean, so we don't know exactly where he came from, like in the movie. And the kid, Hogarth, is a kid. He's fishing and he sees the Iron Man. He goes and alerts his father, who's in the army. And yep. So, and for a time after the Iron Giant's exposed to Hogarth's father, Hogarth basically tries to bond with him, and something that's like in the film. The Iron Giant picks up the ability from Hogarth through Hogarth's mannerisms to communicate like a human. And but then we also learn the reason why the Iron Giant has been sent to Earth is because there's a space dragon that's also coming to Earth to attempt to destroy it. And the big this is where the major difference from the film and the book come in, which is where the Iron Giant basically challenges challenges the space dragon to a competition to find out who is stronger. And this is actually this is kind of strange. The Iron Man basically agrees to sit surrounded by a ring of the space dragon's fire. And yes, but he's an Iron Man. He doesn't melt. That's what I was thinking. The Iron Man just doesn't melt. Normally, if with a fire's dragon, I think an Iron Man would melt. But no, he survives it. So the Iron Man then says to the dragon, "Go and sit on the sun, and see if you can stand those fires." So the dragon goes. He sits on the sun for 24 hours, comes back. And so, yeah, so they both won both of their bets. And so the Iron Man asks him to go for a second time and sit on the sun, which he does again. And it nearly pretty much the dragon is nearly done in by his second attempt. He comes back and he's very out of shape from sitting on the fires at the sun twice. So the Iron Man then he still won. So the Iron Man says do it a third time, and yeah, the space dragon goes and sits on the fire of the sun the third time, and yeah, he survives it, but then he's ready to give up, and surrender. So yeah, it means the Iron Man's won the contest, and so the space dragon agrees not to destroy the world and to apologise for coming and causing harm to the planet. To make amends, the dragon actually goes around the Earth singing a song, and that's basically I think that's basically how the book ends. Yeah, the Iron Giant is given a present of some old metal to eat by like every junk dealer in the world. So yeah, it's a basic story. It's not a very long book. That brings us to the end of talking about the book. So now we're going to move on to the film. Now the first thing to say about the movie is the reason why the title was changed in the States from the Iron Man to the Iron Giant is obviously because they want to avoid any confusion with the Marvel superhero Iron Man. And yeah, also it doesn't exactly follow the story of the book. For example, like the thing with the space dragon and certain characters that are in the movie who are in the movie aren't in the book. The difference is Hogarth's mum, the boy Hogarth. She's a single woman. I think she's a widowed. She's a widowed mother. So his father died. I think it says his father. You see pictures in the house that the father was an army general. Unfortunately, he lost his life. So yeah, the Iron Giant begins. The movie begins with Sputnik, because it's set in so it starts with the Sputnik satellite focusing on Earth, and then this giant sort of alien-like object lands in the ocean near the town of Rothwell, where it's set. And so the whole town, and then it starts with the whole town, people sound being driven crazy, thinking it's being set, because it's set during the Gulf War. They believe it's weapons sent to destroy them by either the Russians or the Chinese or the Canadians or any rival country to the US. And then we cut to Hogarth riding on his bike to his mum's place of work, which is a cafe. I say since she lost her husband, and she has a job kind of as a waitress in a cafe. So she explains that she's quite hard done by. And Hogarth comes in. We find out that he has picked up a squirrel to keep as a pet because he's an only child. His mother's always having to work, late extra shifts to make ends meet for the family. So he's a bit lonely. So it implies that he's brought several sort of animals home in the past that he wants to keep as pets. And so yeah, he brings in a squirrel that he picked up, and he tries to tell his mum about. But she's reluctant to let him keep it because she talks about the fact that one time he had a raccoon that caused no end of trouble. And then when she finally agrees to just see the squirrel, we realize he's holding the squirrel in a cardboard box. And this is kind of silly. This is kind of the typical 90s charm about the careless kid. Trying to keep a wild squirrel in a cardboard box is stupid because it simply just bites holes. And we find out it escaped and is running around the cafe. And then we get introduced to the first new character, the first original character, called Dean. Dean is a local scrapyard owner who collects scrap metal and then tries to turn it into art sculptures. And he's trying to carve a career for himself doing that. And yeah, we found out he's a single man. So yes, Hogarth goes and asks him if he's seen the squirrel, and then there's this really funny scene after Hogarth's mum comes and intervenes and scolds Hogarth for disturbing Dean. We find out that the squirrel's made it into Dean's jeans, or pants as they call them, and so after havoc is wreaked trying to catch the squirrel, Then we cut to Hogarth back at home. He's had to go home. He gets a call from his mum to say that she's got to work late again. And then Hogarth, we find out, he's home on his own. And this is one of the things, I think, this kind of thing that certain people really don't like about some kids' movies. Like, you've just heard that this certain, this alien object has landed on Earth. You don't know what it is, or potentially this whatever it could be, this potential weapon of mass destruction, and you're leaving a kid on his own at night. And we find out, his mum tells him not to watch any scary movies or not have any late snacks, but he just disobeys her anyway, as most kids would do. He sat watching a sort of sci-fi horror movie. He's eating cake with cream, and suddenly, while he's watching the movie, his TV goes fuzzy. And so he goes out and climbs onto his roof to look at the TV antenna, where he realises that it's actually been completely ripped out. So he gets his BB gun, attaches his torch to it, grabs his coat, grabs a sort of toy army helmet, and goes running out into the woods. And that's where we get first introduced to the Iron Giant. Sorry, that's my phone there. I'll have to. I'll finish this review, then I'll happily go and answer it. The Iron Giant, yes, and that's where we first get introduced to the Iron Giant. Because it turns out he's basically this big metal robot. That's sort of he's a typical kind of kids-looking robot. Looks very much like a big silver kind of robot, like an average toy robot would look, in a robot simply with a robotic walk, sort of humanoid form. And he's actually, and it turns out, he ate Hogarth's television antenna, and then he tries to eat the power generator at the electric substation, the power station in the town. And basically he gets caught up in the wires and then electrocutes himself, which causes him to malfunction. And so Hogarth, after he's malfunctioned, and Hogarth presumes he's either dead or broken, so Hogarth goes and tries to wake him up by dropping rocks into his mouth. Blast that phone. I know who it is that's trying to call me, if they're going to repeatedly call me till I answer, but I'm just going to, sorry about this, I'm just going to close this door so it's not to disturb us. Yes, so eventually, yes, the Iron Giant comes back online, he wakes up, and for a time he starts to chase after, he doesn't actually try to chase after Hogarth, but Hogarth's mum comes home, and when she realises he's gone, she runs out in a panic to look for him. And basically what happened is Hogarth's toy, his BB gun, got stamped on by the Iron Giant when he held it in his way. He held it in the giant's foot's way to stop it stamping on him. So of course Hogarth's mum comes to the woods looking for him. She finds him. He tries to tell her about the robot, so he knows what that mysterious weapon now was, and explains that it explains that it's not an alien. It's not invaders from Mars. It's not like a missile or anything. It's not a bomb. But of course, his mum's in a really bad mood because he went off at night on his own, and she assumed that she'd lost him. So she doesn't listen to him. She just tells him to stop, and then we cut to the next day, which is in Hogarth's classroom, where they're talking about the this mysterious thing that's landing on Earth, and he tries to tell this group of kids, while he's drawing a picture of the giant, he tries to tell the kids that this is what it is. It's a giant robot. And of course, they don't believe him. They don't believe he's seen it. Basically the teacher catches them out talking and tells them off. And then we start to realise what's happening around the town is then this character called Kent Mansley, who's the army general and the main protagonist of the film, the main antagonist, sorry, an army general who's summoned to the town of Rothwell to try and investigate this mysterious object that's landed in the ocean there. He comes in. Well, we find out he's near the woods, trying to get evidence of the evidence of the evidence of the happening, the mysterious thing that's come to Earth. He's trying to get evidence like photos, but then when he comes back to his car, he realizes it's had a big bite taken out of it, and then we find out that several vehicles around the town, several left parked vehicles, have got huge bites taken out of them. So of course what we know is happening is that the Iron Giant has been eating the vehicles. And then what happens is, sorry, I know who this is that's trying to call me. I'm sorry to interrupt, but when I answer the phone, I must tell him to stop doing this, because he repeatedly just rings and rings me till I answer. But yeah, I do know it's a certain someone that's doing it. Alright, so so then we find Hogarth goes looking back in the woods for the giant again that evening. He's got a bit of metal to try and draw the giant out, and Hogarth, while he's waiting for him, he actually goes to sleep by a tree, and then he wakes up and finds that the piece of metal he bought's now gone, and and then the Iron Giant suddenly shows up, and what happens is, Hogarth is then frightened out of his wits. He runs away, and the giant actually runs after him, thinking that the giant means to stomp on him. But no, when Hogarth suddenly falls over, he gets smacked by a branch, and he falls over. And then when he comes to, he sits down, and then the giant just sits down in front of him. And that's when he starts to learn his mannerisms. We find out, the giant's actually really friendly. He and starts to pick up Hogarth's mannerisms. He then tries to sorry, what's going on? And then when Hogarth realizes that the giant's not actually going to hurt him, he tries to teach him to talk. They start bonding very quickly, so Hogarth tries to teach him to talk by first getting him to just say blah blah blah. And yeah, the Iron Giant, when he starts talking, is actually voiced by Vin Diesel, the Fast and Furious star. Not seen too much of his stuff. I haven't actually watched Fast and Furious. One film I do remember Vin Diesel from very well is The Pacifier, which was good. But yeah, so after a time, Hogarth spends with teaching the giant, just getting to know the giant, and of course Hogarth's wondering where he's come from. And then when it's time for Hogarth to go home, the giant basically follows him. Hogarth tries to get him to stay behind, telling him he'll come back to see him tomorrow, but no. The giant just follows him. But then when we get to this scene where they have to cross a train track, Hogarth crosses the train track, and the Iron Giant, actually not knowing what it is, he tries to eat the railing, and then a train starts coming, and so Hogarth quickly helps him to put the track back together, but the Iron Giant is trying to get it accurately put back together, and the train smashes into him and smashes him up. And then we find out that the Iron Giant can actually fix himself. He's been built so he could fix himself. He can telepathically reassemble all his parts and come back again. So Hogarth then gives in and realizes, we just have to take him home. He hides him in his shed, and that night when Hogarth got home, and then Kent, the army general, then comes in, and comes in looking to use the telephone to actually call the president. So he goes to Hogarth's house, coincidentally, which is the nearest house from the woods. And yeah, we instantly get the feeling of this. We know he's the primary antagonist, because and then what happens is Hogarth's mum happens to let it slip that Hogarth's been talking about a giant robot that eats metal. Of course, his mum thinks it's a fantasy. He's making it up. But then, yeah, Kent's heard. Kent says he's heard all about. Kent says he has heard about things like, it being something. He starts to put things together with, the bites taken out of cars, and the power station being wrecked. So yeah, he tries to get out of Hogarth's mum. He tries to ask what else has he been saying. But coincidentally, what happens is one of the Iron Giant's hands is actually running around the house because he didn't get one of his hands back. So it's made its way into the house. It's upstairs. It's in the bathroom. Hogarth goes up to the bathroom, and his mum interrupts him while he's on the toilet. And while he's in the bathroom, and Hogarth pretends he's on the toilet, he says, "Oh wait, little privacy." And then there's a really good, funny scene, a bit of sort of mild adult humour. Hogarth screaming, sort of. You could hear Hogarth screaming with frustration, trying to get the Iron Giant's hand out of the window. And Kent says, "Well, this is why it's so important to chew your food." Kind of making a mild toilet humour joke, a bit of candy for a bit of humour for the adults in the audience. Yeah, alright, and then we cut to where it starts to get really important. That Hogarth is trying to tell a bedtime story to the Iron Giant. He actually brings in some comics, including a Superman comic, and yeah, so this is where Hogarth tells him about Superman. So he chooses only to use his powers for good and not for evil. And then the Iron Giant suddenly finds he's hungry. He rubs his tummy. He can feel hungry. So they go out. What they do is Hogarth takes him to the scrapyard, to Dean's scrapyard, to have some metal to eat. And yeah, he eats. So the Iron Giant basically eats all the scrap metal, and then they go out into There's a really nice scene where the Iron Giant's holding Hogarth up in his hand, and they're walking through the town. And they coincidentally, when they go, coincidentally they're walking back through the woods, and there's this scene with a deer. And the Iron Giant stops and sees the deer, because this is the first time he's seen another animal other than a human. And that unfortunately, what happens is the deer is then shot by two hunters. And this really breaks the Iron Giant's heart. Now, something I should just say I know about this scene, that I found out about, is that this was actually changed very at the last minute. Originally, what they planned to happen was that the Iron Giant would actually try and just tap the deer when he saw it to be friendly, but unfortunately he would end up suffocating it, not realising, that his hand would put so much pressure on the deer he'd actually crush it. But they can't. They decided no. They just decided that wouldn't be right. And kids or people in the audience may not find themselves rooting for the Iron Giant through the film, so they changed it to just that the deer gets shot at the time he's there. And that's when and Hogarth tries to tell him, because the hunters dropped the gun. They leave the gun behind that they shot the deer with. And Hogarth tries to tell the giant, that guns kill and it's wrong to kill, but it's not bad to die. And when the Iron Giant asks him one day if he's going to die, Hogarth explains, well, he doesn't know, because the Iron Giant is a machine, but he has feelings, and he understands things. So this is where the main message of the movie is the fact that someone's soul doesn't die. And I know that this was kind of what the plot for the movie was. Yeah, the whole thing behind the movie is, the idea that, this is actually a gun, sort of a radioactive weapon that has a soul, is what the Iron Giant is. And then what happened? Yeah, and so after Hogarth explained to the giant about, the fact that it's wrong to kill, but it's not wrong to die, and that guns kill. But also, one other thing is we first get the first sign that there is something dangerous about the Iron Giant when he sees the gun, and his eyes turn red, and he's actually starting his weapon mode, because what we do find out is he's actually a radioactive weapon, that's built mainly for defence. And then, so yeah, they take him back to the scrapyard, and then Dean comes out wondering what's going on, and he finds Hogarth there. Hogarth explains, he's got to have somewhere for the giant to stay where he knows he'll be safe and he'll have metal to eat. And but Dean points out that he doesn't know, Hogarth doesn't know where he came from or what he is, and yeah, this is the real start between Hogarth and Dean's friendship. Dean invites him in for coffee. Hogarth tries to explain about himself, how he kind of stands out. He's kind of a bit of a loner child amongst the other kids at school. He says the other kids make fun of him because he doesn't want to be the sort of person they want to be. But then Dean tells him, no one else but you decides what you want to be. As I said, the big message of the movie is you are who you choose to be. And then after that, Hogarth goes home for the night. And then when he wakes up in the morning, he finds out, that his mum has rented a room out to Kent Mansley. Now, of course, the real reason for this is because Kent Mansley knows. So just another thing, so the first scene where Hogarth meets Mr. Mansley actually found Hogarth's BB gun, his broken BB gun, in the woods, and of course, for Mr. Mansley, that finally is the final piece of the puzzle. He knows that Hogarth knows about whatever it is that's landed on Earth. So he takes advantage of the fact that his mum's got a room to rent, moves in so he can get what he wants to know out of Hogarth, and much to Hogarth's irritation, since now he's living with him, there is a scene where Hogarth goes home at night. His mum's got to work late. He's left alone with Mr. Mansley. And Mr. Mansley basically forces him into telling, because Mr. Mansley also found out Hogarth's camera that he took with him that night when he found the giant. And he goes and develops the pictures, and there's pictures now. He's got his evidence, pictures with Hogarth and the giant. So he forces Hogarth to tell him where he is, otherwise he'll get Hogarth taken away from his mum, and his mum will be put away. Hogarth then tells Mr. Mansley that the giant is at the scrapyard, and the giant, and then Mr. Mansley actually puts some drugs on Hogarth's face to make him think that what's the conversation that's gone on between them is a dream. He wakes up the next morning finding he's trapped in the house because Mr. Mansley's put locks on all the doors, he's nailed down all the windows. And the army then so he calls the army in the next morning. They go to the scrapyard, and what Dean's actually done is he's buried the giant kind of in a pile of scrap. He's in a pile of scrap, to make him look like he's just a piece of art that he's building. But then, the army then falls for that. But of course, this makes Mr. Mansley look really bad, really retarded, like he's made a fool of the army. So he's told he's got to go back to Washington and clear out his office because he's going to be fired, because he's just wasted the whole army's time. But then this is when we get to the climax of the movie, where Hogarth and Dean and the giant are by the lake, and what happens is, first, there's this really funny scene where the Iron Giant copies Hogarth jumping into the lake, and then basically splashes out the whole lake and washes Dean away in his deck chair. And then Hogarth fires this toy gun, pretending to be Atomo and Superman. But then the Iron Giant then starts to activate his defense mode because he sees the sort of a spark coming from Hogarth's toy gun. And what happens is the Iron Giant accidentally blasts near where Hogarth is standing with a ray, and then Dean basically gets in between them and tells the giant that he nearly killed Hogarth. That's when then the giant walks off in disgrace, and Hogarth and Dean go and follow him. And then the army coincidentally see the robot coming into town, and then they realise that Kent was right, so they move in. So they turn around to go back and attack the giant. And then while this happens, then the giant is being shot at by the army, and then he finally activates his full defense mode and starts going on a rampage, blasting rays, and they made it so he didn't actually kill anybody. He just blew up empty tanks and things. And then, while Dean's trying to stop the army attacking the giant, he explains that he only attacks in defense. You know, it's the fact that they're shooting at him, that the army are actually attacking him, that's making him fire back at them. And but first Kent, and finally when he says that Hogarth is with the giant, yes, Hogarth is with the giant. He's in his hand, and they try and call off the attack, and then Kent finally is persuaded to call off the attack, and then just as quickly, as the giants are about to fire one last shot, Hogarth runs in front of him and says, "It's me, Hogarth. Guns kill. It's bad to kill." And he says he doesn't have to be a gun because he has feelings. He has a soul. So he reminds him again that he is who he chooses to be. So yeah, the giant then basically returns to his normal mode. He's just his humanoid mode, and then they still reckon, but the army is still up. They have to destroy the giant because of how dangerous. You know, they see now, that he's dangerous. So Kent Mansley goes berserk and then tells the military to launch a missile to the giant's location, which will destroy the giant and anyone that's there. So yeah, this is where the big climax of the movie comes. When he sees the missile, and the giant learns, when Hogarth tells him when the missile hits the Earth, everyone there will die. So the Iron Giant launches his rockets, because he has rocket launchers that can allow him to fly, and he then basically goes and collides with the missile to sacrifice himself. And we assume, the giant's done. He's sacrificed himself. I know that they did originally say they planned to have the Iron Giant go back to his defense mode and use his weaponry to destroy the missile. But the reason why they didn't was because the Iron Giant felt, even though he didn't want to be a gun, he felt ashamed of what he'd done. He felt ashamed he was built as a weapon, so he decided to go and sacrifice himself and collide with the missile, so that oh god, this bloke is still ringing me. Right, please excuse that phone, but it's constantly just ringing all the way through this review. Right, so yes, I'll just quickly get this finished. The giant then goes. So yeah, the reason why they decided that is because the giant feels ashamed. He doesn't want to be a risk to people. He doesn't want to ever become a weapon again. So he decides to sacrifice himself and collide with the missile. And then it's kind of sad. It's a very sad ending, because we assume that the giant's dead, and Hogarth is given the one remaining part of the giant, which is actually one of his ear bolts, kind of like Frankenstein's ear bolts, Frankenstein's monster's ear bolts. Yes, but then when we cut, and it's implied then that Dean and Hogarth's mum are developing a relationship, and that they're going to get together, because Dean's now kind of like Hogarth's fatherly figure now. And in memory of the giant, Dean did like a statue with a little grave, a little monarch to the giant, made it out of scrap. And but then later, just at the end, we find that the part of the giant that Hogarth has is beeping. He lets it out the window to find, and then he remembers, of course, that the giant can assemble himself. And then it cuts to, I think it's I don't know if it's on Earth or if the parts fell to somewhere in the Arctic or something, but it's in a snowy area where the giant then is reassembling himself. And then the last thing we look at is the giant with his antenna calling all his parts back. We know that he's going to come back. He's going to probably go back to Hogarth, and it's going to be happily ever after. Yes. And that's the end. Right. So a few just things I'd like to say before I end is that I know that the Iron Man book was written by Ted Hughes as a story he told his children when they were young, because they lost their mother at a very young age, and it was very painful both for him and for the kids. So he wrote this story about sort of a gun with a soul. And yeah, the movie played a similar part because the director, Brad Bird, he'd done The Incredibles. Yeah, he worked a lot with Disney, and then he also worked in front of 20th Century Fox to The Simpsons, and then finally went to Warner Brothers when he pitched the idea for the Iron Giant. He'd actually lost his sister, who he was very close with, and of course, yeah, he had this idea to turn this into a movie because of the whole idea that souls don't die. And yeah, so it is just a wonderful movie. The story is great. The animation is good. It's a mix of hand-drawn and CGI. The CGI is mainly for the Giant, since the late 90s was still the very beginning of CGI. At first, though, unfortunately, it got very praised reviews from critics and audiences, but apparently it bombed at the box office. I remember going to see it at the cinema with my mum and sister when I was 9 years old, and we just really enjoyed it and had the video. And about a few years back, I did buy the DVD, but I'm not quite sure where it is because I was thinking to watch it recently. And then I found that yesterday, I coincidentally was in HMV and found this signature edition on Blu-ray. Yes, I found the Blu-ray signature edition here. Here it is. And so yeah, I watched it. I enjoyed watching it, and but then since then, it's kind of since it bombed the first time, it's gained a very loyal cult following, and it's now considered to be a classic, just an animated classic. I mean, this is probably, I think, in my opinion, out of any, beside Disney and DreamWorks films, because they were the big competitors at the time, and this movie, I think, is apparently what saved Warner Brothers animation department, because they were on the risk of going down, because they had a few animated movies of their own that really flopped and failed in the past, in the few years before the Iron Giant, but this really saved it. I think, in terms of, besides any Disney film or or DreamWorks film that I like, this is probably one of my favourites. This is for me, this is a really big favourite. I love it. It's a childhood classic, and it says, as it says here on the back, it says an instant classic. So yes, it is a wonderful movie. It is. It's easily so enjoyable for both adults and kids. It's a real family movie. My mum loved it. Me and my mum and sister, when we had it on video, we used to watch it together so many times. We all enjoyed it. So yeah, so that is my review on the Iron Giant. I say there was one more thing I wanted to say. I have to say, this is the instant edition. Has a couple of new scenes in the movie. Yeah, right. So I think we'll bring this on to the end now. So yes, this is now time to come to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this review, and once again, I do very much apologise for my phone continuously ringing through this. I have no desire to stop this interview, and I'm gonna go now, answer this phone and give this guy a telling off. Alright, so yes, thank you for watching. You're all awesome. If you like, leave a comment and subscribe if you're new. Bye.